another in Mexico. But they share the exact same name, Guadalajara. How does that even happen? Well, the story behind it, it's this incredible journey through conquest, culture, and yeah, a whole lot of contradiction.
And that's the big question, right? The central puzzle we're going to unpack. How can just one word, a name, end up representing both an ancient European town and this vibrant Latin American metropolis? The answer tells us so much about how history travels and transforms.
I mean, the difference between these two places is just wow. On one hand, you have Guadalajara, Spain. Think historic, quiet, really defined by its deep ancient past. Then you jump across the ocean, and you've got Guadalajara, Mexico, the Pearl of the West. It's huge, it's alive, it's a massive hub of culture and technology, two completely different worlds sharing one name.
Okay, so to get to the bottom of this, we've got to go way back to the very beginning, to the River of Stones in Spain, where the name first got its meaning. So here's the first surprise. The name Guadalajara isn't even originally Spanish. Nope, it comes from Arabic, Wādī al-Ḥijārah, which translates to River of Stones. This is basically a linguistic fossil, a direct leftover from the centuries of Moorish rule. You know, that period when Arab and Berber Muslims from North Africa controlled a huge chunk of the Iberian Peninsula. And this isn't some random one-off thing. It really shows you just how deep that influence runs. The name Guadalajara isn't an exception at all. It's part of this massive linguistic inheritance. We're talking about thousands of Arabic words that are just woven right into the fabric of the Spanish language today.
So the big question is, how does this Arabic-Spanish name end up in Mexico? Well, it wasn't a peaceful move. It was literally carried across the Atlantic as part of a brutal conquest. Think of it like a violent transplant from the old world to the new.
So after Cortés takes down the Aztec Empire, Spanish expansion just explodes. And barely a decade later, this new settlement gets founded. And here's the key. While some guy named Cristóbal de Oñate was the one who officially established it, the city was named Guadalajara to honor the hometown of the expedition's ruthless leader, a conquistador named Nuño Beltrán de Guzmán.
And we really need to be clear about this guy, Nuño de Guzmán. He wasn't some noble explorer. The history books paint him as exceptionally cruel, even by the standards of the time. His whole strategy was based on terror, on killing, torture, and enslavement, and the new Guadalajara was born directly out of that violence.
So you have this incredibly violent start, and that creates this deep contradiction that really defines the new city. Because what grows from this foundation of pure terror is a place of stunning beauty, a city of just fascinating, stark contrasts.
And you can literally see this contradiction in the city's bones, in its architecture. The Spanish put up these huge, grandiose Baroque churches to scream, "We're in charge now." But what did they build them with? They used local materials like adobe mud brick and volcanic cantera stone, and it was often built with indigenous labor. So what you get is this physical blend, this fusion of the conqueror and the conquered.
The Spanish even tried to force their sense of order onto the land itself. They used this super rigid grid pattern called La Traza for all their new towns. And this wasn't just about making things look neat, it was a tool of control. It was like stamping a European blueprint onto a completely different world.
But here's the irony, right? What was that perfect European grid actually made of? Adobe, a building material made of mud and straw, an ancient indigenous technology. So even while the Spanish are imposing their rigid, top-down order, they're completely dependent on local knowledge and local materials to pull it off.
But the beautiful buildings, all that colonial splendor, it hides a much, much darker economic engine. Because for a huge part of its early history, Guadalajara's beauty was paid for by the profits from a booming market in human beings.
And look, this isn't just speculation. We have the receipts. Literally. This chart comes from a recent academic study that dug into the actual bills of sale from the city's market. This is hard data, telling a really tough story.
So what do the records show? At least, and I mean at least, 1,365 documented sales of enslaved people in the city just during the 17th century. And you have to remember, that's only what was officially registered. The real number? It was probably way, way higher.
The data also shows this really fascinating and tragic shift over time. So in the early 1600s, most of the enslaved people being sold were born in Africa. But by the end of that same century, the majority were actually born in the Americas. They were called Creoles. And within that group,
people classified as mulattos, meaning they had mixed African and European ancestry, made up almost 3/4 of all the sales. A huge change.
So how did the Spanish colonial system deal with this increasingly mixed population? Well, they developed this incredibly complex racial caste system called calidad. And as the population blended more and more, the labels got more and more specific. You start seeing these crazy terms like mulatto morisco blanco showing up in sale documents. This wasn't just about describing people. It was a system designed to police the lines, the very blurry lines between who is considered a slave and who is considered free.
Okay, so out of this really complicated, often brutal colonial history, Guadalajara, Mexico starts to forge its own identity, a totally unique identity that would eventually become synonymous with Mexican culture itself.
I mean, just think about it for a second. When you think of Mexico, what comes to mind? For so many people, it's the sound of mariachi music, the taste of tequila, that amazing rich stew called birria, the traditions of the Mexican rodeo, charreria. Guess what? All of those iconic cultural symbols have their roots right here in Guadalajara and the state of Jalisco.
But of course, in true Guadalajara fashion, there's another contradiction. This cradle of deep tradition is also a hyper-modern economic force. Its tech sector's absolutely booming. You've got huge companies like Intel and Oracle there, and it's earned this nickname, the Silicon Valley of Mexico. So let's circle all the way back. The original Guadalajara in Spain? It's still a historic, provincial city. But its namesake in Mexico? It's a massive, sprawling, global metropolis with over 5 million people. You could say the Spanish city was the seed of the name, but the Mexican city, that's the completely unique, massive, and incredibly complex tree that grew from it.
So it all comes back to that question, what's in a name? Well, as we've seen, a single word can hold an entire world of history inside it.
So, for Guadalajara, what's in its name? It's a link to an ancient river of stones. It is absolutely the scar of a violent conquest. And, at the same time, it's the seed of something completely new and vibrant. I think for these two cities, one thing is crystal clear. A name is never, ever just a name. It's a history.